picture a woman tied to a silver birch tree in the middle of a frozen Yorkshire field.
Oh, it's such a striking image.
It really is. The snow is falling so fast and so heavily that it's literally turning her into a human snowman.
Right, she's just completely immobilized out there.
Exactly. And eventually, the local crows discover her, which is just a gruesome, horrifying scene to even imagine.
Oh, it's incredibly bleak.
But the absolute most terrifying part of this entire scenario, at least to me, isn't the cold, and it isn't the birds.
No, it's the ropes, isn't it?
Yes. It's the fact that the ropes binding her to that tree were specifically designed to let her go.
That detail just changes everything about the crime.
It totally does. Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. Today our mission is to unpack the source transcript of Ken Whitmore's brilliantly twisted play, Colder Than of Late.
And this is not your standard whodunit.
Not at all. We are going to dissect a story that traps you in a blizzard, surrounds you with suspects who all have, honestly, incredibly good reasons to kill, and ultimately forces you to question the very definition of justice.
Yeah, we are looking at a masterclass in shifting perspectives here. I mean, the environment Whitmore builds, this 1947 snowbound village called Gimmerbeck, it's essentially a pressure cooker.
A completely isolated pressure cooker.
Right. The snowdrifts are 20 feet high, the phone lines are dead, and, the roads are completely impassable.
So physical isolation is the immediate threat.
Exactly. But as we dig into the text, we uncover this profound emotional and psychological isolation, something that had been suffocating these villagers long before the first snowflake even fell.
Which means we need to start by looking at the source of that suffocation.
Oh, absolutely. We have to talk about Martha Moraine.
Yes, we have to examine the victim, Martha Moraine. And honestly, I hesitate to even call her a victim.
Right, because tyrant feels much more accurate, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, she is 73 years old, living up in the lead hall on the edge of the moor, and she essentially operates as a feudal lord over this 20th century village.
Her control is absolute, and it is largely economic control.
Right. She basically owns the town.
Mm-hmm. She really does. She owns the local mill where most of the town works. She owns the tannery. She owns 30,000 acres of land and like half the cottages in the village itself.
It's staggering.
Yeah. Her family effectively purchased Gimmerbeck in the late 1800s. So she holds the livelihood and the shelter of nearly every resident right in the palm of her hand.
What strikes me as so uniquely insidious about her, though, is the method of her cruelty.
Oh, for sure.
She isn't ordering executions or anything cartoonish. She weaponizes the mundane.
That's a great way to put it.
She takes the administrative tools of daily life, rent books, ledgers, employment contracts, and turns them into instruments of psychological torture.
Yeah, and the transcript gives us a perfect, chilling example of this right away. We hear this interaction between Moraine and one of her tenants, a woman named Sarah Mitchell.
The cottage situation.
Right. The conditions of Sarah's cottage are abysmal. The damp is so pervasive that the wallpaper is literally killing off the walls.
And that's entirely because Moraine refuses to spend a single penny on maintenance, right?
Exactly. So Sarah hands over her rent, which is 5 shillings and 9 pence, and she makes a very specific request. She asks Moraine to write the receipt in the rent book using ink.
Because Moraine has a habit of writing rent receipts in pencil, which is just such a massive red flag.
It is. And Sarah's husband, Norman, who actually works at Moraine's mill, explicitly warned his wife not to accept a pencil receipt.
Smart man.
Right. But when Sarah pushes the issue, Moraine immediately plays the victim. She acts all offended, asking if she's suspected of some underhand, devious malpractice.
When she totally is doing exactly that. Let's unpack the mechanics of that pencil for a moment, because later in the text, another character reveals exactly how Moraine uses it.
You're talking about the one-armed artist, George Sarum.
Yes, George Sarum. He reveals that his wife paid their rent, Moraine wrote the receipt in pencil, and then at a later date just took an eraser to the ledger.
It's so brazen.
She literally rubbed out the payment, took the Sarum family to court for non-payment, and initiated eviction proceedings.
That is staggering. I mean, let's think about the legal and psychological implications of that for you, the listener.
Right. Put yourself in that situation.
Imagine living in a post-war housing market, renting from the most powerful person in town. You hand over your hard-earned money, and she gives you a receipt that she can literally erase.
It's terrifying. She isn't just greedy. She is intentionally engineering traps.
Exactly. She is creating a system where you can follow all the rules, pay all your debts, and still be completely ruined at her whim.
So her malice is entirely premeditated.
Oh, absolutely. She thrives on the sheer panic of her tenants. And, she extends this need for control far beyond just real estate.
Oh, right, the brass band.
Yes. Consider her reaction to the local brass band. The Gimmerbeck British Wool Brass Band, which is mostly comprised of her own mill workers, travels to a contest in Manchester and actually wins first prize.
Which is a massive moment of pride for a working-class community like that.
A huge deal. So they celebrate. And because they are human, they celebrate a bit too hard, resulting in the entire band failing to show up to work on time the next morning.
But you would expect a boss to dock their pay. Or maybe issue a stern warning, right?
Right, standard discipline. But Moraine bypasses that entirely. She goes straight into their rehearsal room, physically confiscates every single brass instrument, and suspends the band for a month.
She just takes their instruments away.
Yes, and she threatens to terminate their employment if they ever step out of line again.
She doesn't just attack their wallets, she attacks their morale.
Exactly. A brass band in a 1940s northern English village was the beating heart of community identity.
By silencing those instruments, she's reminding them that they are not allowed to experience joy, pride, or success unless she sanctions it.
Whitmore is meticulously crafting Moraine as the ultimate antagonist here. He is deliberately misaligning the audience's moral compass.
And he digs into the past to solidify it too. The text reveals this story from 1909. Moraine brought a mill worker up from a neighboring town and the man tragically died.
Right.
The very next day, in the dead of winter, while the widow was still actively mourning, Moraine served her an eviction notice.
It's just heartless.
The widow desperately left her young son with a neighbor, hugged across a moor to beg Moraine for mercy, was rejected, and subsequently froze to death on her way back.
Putting all of this together forces a deeply uncomfortable question for the audience.
It really does.
When a community is trapped under a predator who uses the law as a weapon and the law offers no protection in return, what happens when that predator is found murdered?
Right. Do you view it as a tragedy or as a necessary act of community hygiene?
It feels like removing a parasite, honestly.
Exactly. You don't hold a funeral for a tapeworm. And into this exact moral gray area steps the man who is supposed to represent objective truth, Detective Superintendent Bernard Baxter of Scotland Yard.
And his arrival perfectly mirrors the chaos of the environment. He doesn't just drive into town, he literally collides with it.
Yes. Martha Moraine, driving her 75-year-old Bentley, pulls out in front of him on a treacherous, icy road.
The resulting confrontation is incredible. Moraine immediately attempts to extort 50 pounds from him for a scratched mudguard.
She actually physically grabs his coat, doesn't she?
She does. She grabs his coat, she threatens him, and she brags that she essentially holds the local magistrates and police in her pocket.
And Baxter's response tells us everything about his methodology. He doesn't raise his voice in panic or get intimidated.
No. He coldly quotes the exact section of the Offenses Against the Person Act of 1861, informing her that by holding his coat, she is committing an unlawful assault.
He uses the letter of the law to instantly neutralize her intimidation tactics.
Which initially makes you want to root for him. He seems immune to her wealth and power.
I was definitely rooting for him at first. But as he settles into the local inn, the mortal man, the text starts revealing his backstory through Grinton, a reporter who is also trapped by the snow.
Yeah, Grinton tells us Baxter has a very specific reputation. The press calls him the scourge of the female criminal.
That specific phrasing should immediately act as a massive red flag for you listening.
Oh, totally. The text delves into his most famous victory, the Rosalind Withers case.
Can you walk us through that one?
Sure. According to the reporter, Withers was a woman who left her husband for an American Army lieutenant. Months after she moved out, the husband was found stabbed to death.
And the lieutenant immediately confesses, right?
Yes. He takes full, sole responsibility and insists Rosalind was nowhere near the scene.
So the police go in, the forensic teams tear the house apart with vacuum cleaners, searching for any trace of her.
And they find nothing. Absolutely zero evidence she had stepped foot in that house in 6 months. Legally, she is in the clear.
But Baxter becomes completely obsessed with breaking her. He subjects her to weeks of relentless psychological pressure.
And when she refuses to confess, he returns to the crime scene one final time, completely alone.
And miraculously finds the one thing an entire team of forensic experts missed with industrial vacuums.
Right. 2 inches of turquoise cotton jammed deep down between the cushions of a sofa.
Which he traces to a skirt Rosalind had purchased just 2 days prior to the murder.
And that single thread destroys her alibi, convicts her as an accessory, and sends her to the gallows.
It's wild. The local doctor, Dr. Duncany, and the reporter Gritton are openly repulsed by this story when they hear it. They question the morality of hanging a woman over 2 inches of thread.
Wait, hold on. Is Baxter actually a brilliant detective, or is he just a fanatic with a badge?
That's the million-dollar question. Because the way he defends himself in the transcript is deeply disturbing.
It is. He talks about women with absolute vitriol. He compares them to a cage full of Bengal tigers, claiming he has never observed mercy in women.
He even uses the fact that Rosalind left her children as moral justification for executing her.
His internal logic is deeply flawed by misogyny. He isn't acting as an impartial seeker of facts. He operates as, like, an inquisitor hunting heretics.
And the local characters vocalize the terrifying implication. Did Baxter genuinely find that turquoise thread? Or did his absolute certainty in her wickedness lead him to manufacture the evidence?
If you believe someone is inherently evil, how far will you go to prove it?
We really have to keep that dark possibility in mind, because right as we learn this about Baxter, Moraine's body is discovered.
The timeline of her disappearance is tight. She received a phone call on Monday night.
She told her housekeeper. The fools agreed to settle, put on her red hat and coat, and walked out into the cold just as the blizzard was beginning.
And by Tuesday morning, the town is just buried. Some local kids are out sledging in a field near Moraine's estate.
They start throwing snowballs at what looks like a snowman built by the wind.
Right, and a snowball knocks the top off, revealing a human head. It's Moraine.
The mechanics of the murder scene are vital to understanding the killer's intent here. She wasn't bludgeoned or stabbed.
No, she was lashed to a silver birch tree while she was still alive.
And she was tied with green baller twine.
For those who aren't familiar, baller twine is a rough, synthetic, or sisal rope used in agriculture to bind hay.
It's incredibly strong, but it also frays in knots in very specific ways. But the killer didn't just wrap her up in a chaotic frenzy.
No, Baxter examines the ropes and finds something deeply theatrical.
The twine was secured using intricate slip knots. Let's break down how that works, because it's so important.
Yeah, a slip knot under tension is essentially a loaded spring. The killer wrapped the twine around Moraine and the tree, leaving just enough slack so it wouldn't strangle her immediately, and finished it with a slip knot.
But to stop the knot from giving way under her shifting weight, the killer jammed a tiny twig into the mechanism.
The twig acts like the safety pin on a grenade. Baxter notes that all someone would have to do is pull the twig, give the main line a sharp tug, and the entire web of ropes would instantly dissolve and fall away.
Which begs the question, why go through that much trouble?
Exactly.
I mean, if you want her dead, shoot her. If you want her to freeze, just tie her up with square knots. Why engineer a release mechanism?
It reveals a highly calculated two-part plan. The primary goal was suffering.
The killer wanted her to experience the slow, terrifying agony of freezing to death in a blizzard.
And the secondary goal was evasion. The killer intended to return a few hours later, pull that twig, and let her frozen body collapse into the snow.
Because if the police find her lying in a snowdrift with no ropes, it just looks like an accident. An old woman got lost in the storm and succumbed to the elements.
It was designed to be the perfect, untraceable crime.
But something clearly prevented the killer from returning to spring the trap.
Right. And the trap itself leaves Baxter stranded in a village full of people who all benefit from her death.
And nobody in Gimmerbeck is acting the way innocent, grieving people should act.
Not at all. Take George Sarum, the one-armed artist we talked about earlier, the victim of the pencil receipt.
Baxter and Gritton visit his cottage and find a freshly painted canvas on his easel.
And it's a breathtakingly detailed painting of Martha Moraine tied to the silver birch tree, illuminated by moonlight.
Which is insane when you keep the timeline in mind.
Exactly. The police and the village only found the body that morning after it had been completely encased in snow. Sarum's painting depicts the scene before the snow fell.
Sarum freely admits he was up on the moor painting the landscape by moonlight. He says he saw a figure in a red hat walk to the field, followed by a second shadowy figure.
He went down to investigate later and found her trussed up to the tree, dead.
He witnessed the aftermath of a murder, and his immediate instinct was not to alert the authorities, but to set up his easel and document it.
He actually tells Baxter, "To me, it was like dancing on a coffin."
The psychological detachment required to do that is wild.
It really speaks to the theme of community complicity. I mean, Sarum physically could not have tied those intricate slip knots with only one arm.
So he isn't the killer.
No, but his utter lack of horror, his artistic inspiration fueled by hatred, makes him spiritually complicit. He is celebrating the violence.
The entire village is celebrating. While Baxter is trying to conduct interrogations at the Mortal Man Inn, he hears this massive commotion outside.
He opens the window, and through the driving blizzard, he sees the mill workers. They've spontaneously declared a public holiday.
They've built a gigantic bonfire in the middle of the street. The imagery Whitmore provides here is surreal and haunting.
Crinton describes it perfectly. You have the orange flames whipping in the wind, the black sky, snowflakes drifting down, and the villagers linking arms dancing in circles around the fire.
And right in the middle of it all is the brass band, the same band Moraine suspended.
They are out in the freezing cold, playing euphoniums and cornets, reclaiming the joy she stole from them.
For Baxter, this is an absolute affront to his rigid worldview. To him, the law is binary. Murder is a crime, regardless of the victim's character.
Seeing the village treat a brutal homicide as a liberation festival infuriates him. It basically paints a target on the back of every single resident.
So he starts systematically tearing through Moraine's estate, looking for a motive that goes deeper than just petty grievances.
And he finds a locked room containing 41 box files of her private correspondence spanning decades.
And what he uncovers shifts the entire narrative from a story about a cruel landlord into a horrifying exploration of collective trauma and blackmail.
He discovers that Moraine was orchestrating a massive psychological extortion ring.
He finds a series of letters addressed to Mrs. Perigord, who owns the local restaurant, the Shepherd's Pie.
Moraine was pressuring her to sell a 50% share in the business, but the offers are bizarre.
Yeah, instead of negotiating up, Moraine lowers the price every month. £800, then $750, then $600, then $500.
It's the mechanics of a vice grip. She is demonstrating that she has all the time in the world, and every month Mrs. Perigord resists. The cost to her increases.
And every single letter ends with the exact same, highly specific threat. Moraine writes, "I think our partnership would stand proof against anything but a visitation of pestilence."
A visitation of pestilence. It's a very archaic biblical phrase.
And Baxter realizes she used that exact phrase on another prominent villager, the local rector, Arthur Synico.
Baxter finds out that Synico recently inherited £19,000 and two incredibly valuable paintings, a Turner and a Delacroix.
Yet when Baxter visits Moraine's Lead Hall, those two masterpieces are hanging on her walls.
Moraine claimed the rectory was too damp for them. Synico insists he lost his inheritance gambling, but the math just doesn't add up.
Moraine bled him dry, using that same threat, a visitation of pestilence.
To figure out what this pestilence is, Baxter follows a trail of clues to a remote, supposedly haunted stone hermitage out on the moor.
He picks the heavy lock on the door. Inside, he doesn't find stolen money or forged documents.
No, he finds a makeshift shrine. 3 framed photographs of children, carefully placed on an altar.
The photographs are of the rector's daughter, Mrs. Perigord's son, and the son of the local police sergeant, John Titus.
The official village record states that all 3 of these children died of influenza about 18 months prior to the murder.
But Baxter's investigation pieces together the true pathology of what happened, and it is a devastating story of a community making a fatal compromise out of sheer panic.
The timeline takes us back to December 1945. The war has just ended.
Sergeant Titus is returning home from serving with the police in India. His wife despises the Indian climate, and Titus is impatient.
So instead of waiting for a commercial boat that mandates strict medical and quarantine checks, he uses old contacts in the RAF to illegally hop military flights back to England.
He bypasses the quarantine protocols entirely, and he unwittingly brings a biological time bomb into Gimmerbeck.
His young son was already feverish when they arrive.
The boy goes out to play with the rector's daughter and Mrs. Perigord's son. Shortly after, the boy collapses.
Dr. Duncaney's father, the senior physician in the village, examines the child and realizes the terrifying truth. It isn't influenza.
It's typhoid fever.
Put yourself in the shoes of these villagers in 1945. Typhoid is highly contagious and deadly.
But beyond the medical terror, there's an existential economic terror. Gimmerbeck was heavily reliant on the impending summer tourist season, their first real season of peace after years of war.
If the government discovered a typhoid outbreak, the entire village would be heavily quarantined. The tourist season would be annihilated.
The local economy would completely collapse.
Moraine senses the panic and seizes the opportunity to consolidate her power. She calls a secret meeting with the desperate parents and the doctor.
She plays on their fears for the village's survival. She offers them a horrific solution.
Right. She allows them to use her newly constructed, isolated stable block as a secret quarantine hospital.
And the doctor, suffering from hubris, believes he can manage the disease in secret.
They agree to the cover-up, and it is a catastrophic failure.
The disease ravages the children. All 3 of them die in those stables.
To hide the evidence, the infected stables are burned to the ground.
The doctor is so completely broken by his medical failure and the guilt of his complicity that he commits suicide weeks later.
That tragedy alone is enough to destroy a community. But Moraine's true depravity lies in what she does next.
She didn't offer those stables out of civic duty, did she?
Not at all. She engineered a scenario where the most prominent figures in town were now guilty of a massive crime.
If the truth ever leaked out, Sergeant Titus would go to federal prison for smuggling his infected son into the country.
The rector and Mrs. Perigord would be publicly ruined, potentially jailed for participating in a criminal conspiracy that resulted in the deaths of their own children.
Moraine weaponized their grief. She held the secret of the typhoid, the visitation of pestilence, over their heads to enslave them.
She drained the rector's massive inheritance. She was actively stealing Mrs. Perigord's restaurant.
She had the local law enforcement operating as her private security.
It fundamentally changes how we view every interaction in this village. These people aren't just disgruntled tenants.
They are hostages to their own trauma. Moraine literally monetized their dead children.
So having uncovered this, Baxter has the ultimate motive for almost everyone in town.
He gathers them all, the rector, Mrs. Perigord, Dr. Duncaney, Sergeant Titus, and he methodically traps them in their own lies.
He interrogates them about their whereabouts between 9 and midnight on the night of the storm.
Every single alibi crumbles. None of them can prove where they were.
Then Baxter plays his trump card. He reveals that the green baler twine used to bind Moraine to the tree was positively identified as coming from Mrs. Perigord's saddle room.
Now, I have to interject here, because from a purely investigative standpoint, this is a shockingly weak piece of evidence.
It really is. The saddle room is unlocked. It faces the public street.
Literally anyone in Gimmerbeck could have walked in, cut a length of twine, and walked out. But Baxter wields it like a smoking gun.
He hammers away at Mrs. Perigord, who is already mentally fragile from the blackmail, practically daring her to confess.
And Mrs. Perigord snaps back with a brilliant defense. She screams at him, throwing the Rosalind Withers case right in his face.
She yells, "A couple of yards of beller twine, 2 inches of turquoise cotton. He'll do anything to hang a woman."
It forces you to wonder if Baxter is just running his standard playbook here.
Yeah, he finds a community, identifies the most emotionally vulnerable suspect, latches on to a frizzy piece of circumstantial evidence, and uses his authority to weave a noose.
It looks exactly like the climax of a classic Hercule Poirot mystery. The detective has cornered the suspects.
But then, Whitmore completely flips the script. Baxter's behavior abruptly stops making sense.
Right in the middle of the night, while the blizzard is still raging outside, Baxter sneaks out of the inn.
He supposedly borrows a pony and rides up a treacherous, icy path known as the Corpse Road, heading toward the old church on the hill.
Sergeant Titus and the reporter, Grinton, notice he's missing. They follow his tracks through the snow.
As they approach the churchyard, they see a faint light glowing among the headstones, and they hear a rhythmic tapping sound.
They confront him in the pitch black, freezing cold. Baxter is standing over a grave holding a hammer and a chisel.
When they demand to know what he's doing, his excuse is laughable.
He claims he went to the church to find the parish registers to definitively prove the children died of typhoid, but the safe was locked.
So he says he was chipping the thick ice off the gravestones to read the inscriptions, hoping to find proof that the children's bodies weren't cremated.
If we pause and analyze that logic, it completely disintegrates. It is absolute nonsense.
It really is. No gravestone in the 1940s is going to have covered up typhoid death inscribed on it.
And more importantly, why is a high-ranking Scotland Yard detective doing manual labor with a chisel and a blizzard in the middle of the night?
This is the genius of the play's structure. The audience has been conditioned to trust the detective's actions as part of a master plan.
But this scene breaks that trust. Baxter isn't acting like a man trying to uncover a secret. He is acting like a man desperate to bury one.
The next morning, the tension reaches its peak. Baxter summons everyone to the main room of the inn.
He gives a classic villain monologue, pacing the room, accusing the entire village of moral cowardice.
He tells them their alibis are garbage, and he is fully prepared to tear their lives apart to find the killer.
But the rector and Sergeant Titus arrive late to this meeting, and they bring a revelation that shatters Baxter's entire reality.
They went back up to the churchyard in the daylight. They wanted to see exactly which grave Baxter was hacking away at with that chisel.
And he wasn't anywhere near the children's graves.
No. He was standing over a grave that was 40 years old.
The grave of the widow who froze to death on the moor in 1909 after being evicted by Martha Moraine. He was using the chisel to obliterate the name on the stone.
The name on that gravestone was Baxter.
She was his mother. The terrifying scourge of Scotland Yard, Detective Superintendent Bernard Baxter, is the abandoned son of the woman Moraine sent to her death.
It is a breathtaking reversal. And the moment that secret is exposed, the entire case against the village unravels, hinging on one single tiny slip of the tongue Baxter made hours earlier.
Oh, the slip of the tongue is so incredibly satisfying to dissect.
Think back to when Baxter was interrogating George Sarum about his painting of the murder scene.
Baxter was critiquing the artistic details. He casually mentioned to Grinton that the field where Moraine was tied to the tree was scattered with clumps of yellow crocuses.
Which sounds like a very poetic, observant detail for a detective to notice, except for the meteorological timeline.
The weather timeline is the nail in his coffin. The blizzard started at exactly midnight.
Right, the snow fell heavily and continuously. Sergeant Titus didn't discover the body until the next morning, when the field was already buried under 20 feet of snowdrifts.
And Baxter didn't officially visit the crime scene until Titus took him there, after Baxter had supposedly sprained his ankle on the icy road.
Therefore, by the time Baxter laid eyes on that field in any official capacity, those yellow crocuses had been buried under feet of snow for hours.
It is physically impossible for him to have known about those flowers unless he was standing in that field before the snow started falling.
Before midnight, he was there when she was killed.
The great detective is the architect of the murder. Facing the undeniable logic of the crocuses, Baxter drops the facade and confesses.
And the true sequence of events is wild. He didn't come to Gimmerback on assignment.
He was in Yorkshire for an unrelated trial and spontaneously decided to visit his birthplace.
He wanted to visit the grave of the mother he spent his whole life resenting for abandoning him to the foster system.
He had no idea Martha Moraine was still alive. He thought he was just coming to confront a ghost from his past.
But when he arrives at the Mortal Man Inn, the locals unwittingly hand him a loaded gun.
They tell him all about Moraine's current tyrannies, and they recount the legend of the widow freezing on the moor.
Baxter realizes the monster who killed his mother is sitting in a mansion just up the road. And all his years of rigid, suppressed anger just snap.
He decides to execute her, giving her the exact same agonizing death she gave his mother.
This explains every single bizarre anomaly of the crime scene. Baxter was the one who called her on Monday night.
He knew her greed was her weakness. He told her he was the man from the car crash, and he offered to bring her the 50 pounds to settle the damages. The fools agreed to settle.
He went to Mrs. Perigord's unlocked saddle room, stole the beller twine, met Moraine at the field, overpowered her, and lashed her to the silver birch.
And this is where the mechanics of the slip knot finally make sense.
Yes. He designed that intricate twig release system because he fully intended to go back at 4 a.m., pull the knot, and let her body fall so the police would rule it death by misadventure.
It was a flawless plan, undone by sheer random bad luck.
On his walk back to the inn after tying her up, he slipped on the icy road and severely sprained his ankle.
The injury was real. He was physically incapable of walking back out to the field at 4 a.m. to untie those knots.
His own clumsiness trapped her in the ropes, leaving a glaring signature of premeditated murder for the world to see.
Even in defeat, however, Baxter's arrogance is staggering. He sits by the fire, nursing a whiskey, and he openly mocks the villagers.
He calls them cowards. He claims that civilized people are paralyzed by their own consciences while the wicked thrive.
He views himself as a necessary instrument of brutal justice, claiming he did the brave thing they were all too weak to do.
I cannot accept his framing of this. Baxter is desperately trying to dress up his actions in the language of righteousness, but we have to call it what it is. Raw, selfish vengeance.
He's trying to claim credit for liberating the town, but he didn't even know about the typhoid blackmail when he killed her.
He didn't give a damn about the brass band or George Sarum's rent book.
Exactly. That distinction is paramount. His motivation wasn't altruistic. It was entirely personal.
He wanted to avenge a mother he openly admits he hated simply because he found a target for his rage.
He didn't save Gimmerbeck. He used Gimmerbeck. He was fully prepared to use their grief over their dead children to frame them for a murder he committed just so he could walk away clean.
He is no better than Moraine. She monetized their trauma, and he tried to weaponize it for an alibi.
By the end of the text, Baxter emerges as arguably the most terrifying character of all.
He illustrates the profound danger of a mind that equates merciless vengeance with divine justice. The rot inside him is total.
Which brings us to the exit. The trap is sprung. The village knows his secret. But the blizzard is still howling.
They are all trapped inside the Mortal Man Inn together. The roads won't be cleared for days, meaning the actual authorities are a long way off.
Baxter understands that his career, his freedom, and his reputation are completely destroyed.
He stands by the window, looking out at the massive snowdrifts. He remarks that the snow looks very attractive, nothing but miles of clean snow.
And then he quotes Captain Oates.
Right, for context, Captain Lawrence Oates was a member of Robert Falcon Scott's doomed 1912 Antarctic expedition.
When Oates realized his severe frostbite was slowing his team down and eliminating any chance they had of surviving the trek back, he made a fatal decision to sacrifice himself.
Baxter turns to the villagers, echoes Oates's famous last words, saying, "I'm just going outside and maybe some time," and walks out the door of the inn, straight into the freezing blizzard.
He walks out to freeze to death. The cycle is brutally complete.
His mother froze to death. He froze Moraine to death. And now the snow claims him, erasing him from the landscape.
It is an incredibly haunting resolution. Colder Than of Late is so much more than a clever puzzle about slip knots and weather patterns.
It forces you to look at how quickly the desire for justice, when stripped of due process and mercy, devolves into the ugliest form of selfishness.
It also warns us about the cancer of community silence, how compromising with a monster to save yourself only creates an environment where more monsters can thrive.
Gimmerbeck survived the typhoid outbreak, and they outlived Martha Moraine, but the psychological stain of what they allowed to happen in those burned stables will never wash out.
And Baxter proves that a mind entirely dedicated to hunting killers is terrifyingly close to thinking exactly like one.
Which leaves me with one final, deeply unsettling thought.
I want you to carry this with you after this deep dive ends. Think all the way back to the beginning of the story. Think about Baxter's crowning achievement, the Rosalind Withers case.
The case that made him a legend at Scotland Yard.
He sent a woman to hang based entirely on a 2-inch thread of turquoise cotton found wedged deep in a sofa cushion 6 months after a murder, after forensic teams had already vacuumed the house.
Based on everything we just witnessed in Gimmerbeck, knowing the depths of Baxter's dark, methodical, and vengeful nature.
Knowing his intense hatred for women who abandoned their families, knowing how effortlessly he planned to frame an entire innocent village for a murder he committed with his own hands.
The question hangs in the air. Did he actually find that turquoise cotton?
Did the brilliant Eli detective spot the crucial clue? Or did the mind of a murderer simply reach into his pocket and plant the evidence he needed to secure the conviction he so desperately believed was right?
When you spend your entire life convinced that you are the only scalpel capable of cutting out the rot in society, how easy does it become to justify a little extra cutting?
It is a horrifying realization. The laboratory of justice was never sterile. The scalpel was infected from the very beginning.
It really makes you wonder.
If you stare into the blinding white snow long enough, you might just lose sight of where the monster ends, and you begin.